Hello and welcome to another Read With Me. I am Isabel Bedell, and I'm here to read with you another chapter on this amazing, amazing book, The Art of Spending Money by Morgan Housel. And we are on chapter 5, day 6 of this amazing Read With Me session. Or series. So the the previous chapter was really powerful in the sense of he was able to share how billionaires might have a perspective of life versus people that are just getting by have a perspective of life monetarily wise, and how it's kind of ironic that sometimes having the most amount of money actually creates the most amount of problems. This is kind of like what Biggie said, huh? It's like more money, more problems. It might not be the case for everyone, right? For example, he shared Mark Rudolph, the co-founder of Netflix. His definition of success was what matters more than the money you make and the money you spend is the less tangible parts of life that can't be purchased. So spending time with his family, being able to be there whenever important things come up, like birthdays, anniversaries, graduations, recitals, all of those. Being able to be there, present in those moments is what's key. And now we're going to get into chapter number 5, which is called The Most Valuable Financial Asset is Not Needing to Impress Anyone. And Morgan is going to go into two stories of two men which who chose opposite lifestyles, and one is all about internal validation and the other one is all about external validations. So now we're going to get into, I don't know which one this one's going to be, but let's see how it turns out. I'm really excited so far. This book has been very easy to read, easy to understand, and insightful and a breath of fresh air. All that to say that when it comes to spending money and how you should spend it, a lot of people may have opinions, but you must create your own. And I believe this book does a very good job at doing that. So let's get into it. The most valuable financial asset is not needing to impress anyone. The ability to not need to prove yourself to strangers is priceless. Not needing to impress other people, especially strangers, is an asset on your personal balance sheet that can be more valuable than anything else. When you don't feel the need to impress other people, your desires fall. When your desires fall, your satisfaction with what you already have grows. It's really that simple. There are always two benchmarks to measure yourself up against to determine how well you're doing in life, internal and external. The first is how happy you are with yourself. The other is what others may think of you. It's outstanding to watch how agonizing it can be when someone focuses too much on the external benchmark. And it's so thrilling to witness someone whose only goal in life is to nail their internal benchmarks. Let me tell you an extreme story of two guys on opposite ends of the spectrum. Their stories have nothing to do with money, but can teach us so much about how important it is to pick the right benchmark in life. In 1968, the Sunday Times newspaper in London, looking to drum up some publicity and capitalize on the growing sport of sailing, sponsored an around the world boat race. The goal was simple. The first person to sail around the world nonstop, solo, would win the Golden Globe race. It was called a race, but that was technically an afterthought. No one in human history had ever sailed around the world solo, nonstop. So the first person to merely complete the task would instantly be crowned one of the greatest sailors in history. There were no qualification requirements and few rules. 9 men joined the race, one of whom who had never sailed. Just one man finished almost 1 year and 27,000 miles later. Wow. But it was two of the sailors who did not finish who had the most remarkable voyages and stunned the world for opposite reasons. The two men, Donald Crowhurst and Bernard Moitessier, are incredible examples of how the quality of your life is shaped by who you want to impress. Their stories are wild and extreme, but what they dealt with was just as magnified version of what ordinary people face all the time. Donald Crowhurst once said, "Life was a game only the clever would win." And to him, cleverness was the most valuable trait, and lying was okay if it made people happy and helped you win the game. Both ideas would eventually come back to haunt him. Born in 1932, Crowhurst was 36 years old when he heard about the Golden Globe race. There are two important things to know about his life up until this point. Despite huge ambition, he had been a professional failure at nearly everything he had tried. He was kicked out of the both Royal Air Force, the British Army, before starting a business and never took off, and was on the brink of failure. He viewed the Golden Globe as a new shot at redemption, a chance to finally show the world he was worthy of attention. He was not a very good sailor. At best, Crowhurst was a weakened sailor, taking his boat out for trips while being prone to seasickness. But rarely short of confidence, Crowhurst was convinced his homemade sailing navigation equipment could not only propel him to win the Sunday Times race, but that doing so would generate enough attention to save his business. He faced just a few obstacles. He didn't own a boat, he was broke, and he stood no chance of financing the race himself. Crowhurst struck a deal with an English businessman named Stanley Best, who agreed to cover the cost of equipment for the race under two conditions: that they would orchestrate a media frenzy portraying Crowhurst as a sailing savant. And if Crowhurst failed to finish, he would owe all the money back. While preparing for the race, the BBC was enamored with Crowhurst, the brave, unknown amateur about to undertake the hardest race in sailing history. You have to understand how insane this race was. The most grizzled sailors in the world thought it was nearly impossible to sail around the world solo, nonstop. Now, here was Crowhurst, a man the sailing community had never heard of, with almost no experience, stepping up. He reveled in the attention. The thing about Donald was that he thought himself God. One of Crowhurst's friends said, but he wasn't. And the day before Crowhurst set sail, the Globe realized how woefully unprepared he was. His boat, the Tannymouth Electron, had been so heavily modified, so weighed down with half-finished gizmos and gimmicks, that it was merely seaworthy for a short sail near home, let alone a solo trip around the world. Crowhurst's wife, Claire, tried talking him out of the race. "I suppose you're right," he said, "but the whole thing has become too important for me, and I've got to go through with it." After a long pause, he continued, "Darling, I'm so very disappointed in the boat. She's not right. I'm not prepared. If I leave with the things in this hopeless state, will you go out of my mind? Will you go out of your mind with worry?" Claire responded with a question, and "If you give up now, will you be unhappy for the rest of your life?" Donald offered no response and began to cry. Prepared or not, Crowhurst set sail for the Teignmouth, England, on October 31st, 1968, Halloween. It was a disappointment from the start. After 2 weeks at sea, Crowhurst had covered less than half of the distance he intended. Then disaster. Crowhurst's boat began to leak. This bloody boat is just falling into pieces due to lack of attention to engineering detail, he wrote in his diary. The boat was not at risk of sinking, but the incoming water fried its electronics and generator, all but ending any chance of finishing the race. Worse, if Crowhurst continued to the rough seas in the South Atlantic, he knew his fragile boat would quickly capsize. What courses are open? Either I abandon the nonstop attempt or go on with it. If I go on, I have an equal chance of making the trip or drowning, he wrote in his diary. The alternative might be worse. If Crowhurst turned around and went home, he would face not only bankruptcy after being forced to repay his borrowed funds, but shame and humiliation for failing at yet another endeavor. Then the clever Howhurst realized there was a third option, which was outright fraud and deceit. Crowhurst began loitering in the Atlantic, drifting aimlessly in circles in calm water. He then began sending fake coordinates back to England, giving the impression that he was still sailing around the world. The plan was simple. If Crowhurst could kill enough time drifting in the Atlantic, likely 6 months or so, he could convince people that he had plausibly sailed around the world before returning to England with his dignity intact. At this point in the race, Crowhurst began keeping two logbooks, one with his fake locations, which he plotted by reverse engineering how fast he could plausibly have made it to an imaginary destination, and one with his actual location. Tracking his actual location was vital to ensure he remained where he was unlikely to be spotted by other boats, whose crews might reveal his positions to the press back home. You need to be an utter genius to pull off such a fraud like this. Crowhurst was not. In the first few days of hatching his scheme, he made his first major error. While reporting his fake coordinates to the race organizers back home, Crosser's sloppy calculations gave the impression that he was suddenly moving at blistering speed, covering an unprecedented amount of distance. The press, having no idea of what was actually happening, ate it up. The Sunday Times wrote, Donald Crowhurst, last man out in the Sunday Times round the world lone yacht race, covered a breathtaking, possibly record-breaking 243 miles in his 41-foot Timaran, 10th month electronic last Sunday. The achievement is even more remarkable in the light of the very poor speeds in the first 3 weeks of his voyage. He took longer to reach the Cape Verdes than any other competitor, and in his last radio message, Crowhurst said that he was on watch for the full 24 hours. It took a pretty strong nerve. I have never sailed so fast in my life, he said. It was all a lie. He went on like this for months. Crowhurst drifting around the Atlantic, depressed and scared, sending fake coordinates back home to the racers, all while everyone at home thought he was pulling it off, this heroic feat in sailing history. As he plotted his eventual return home, Crowhurst realized he did not want to win the race. Doing so would spark so much attention that the sailing community might dig through his logbooks and discover the deceit. Coming in second place seemed ideal, an incredible performance that would make him a hero, but not so famous that experts would examine his voyage too deeply. Crowhurst knew another sailor, Nigel Tetley. He was on track to win the fastest time around the world. Crowhurst strategically inserted himself into second place, but made another error, coming too close to Tetley. Tetley became nervous about a competitor hot on his tail and began pushing his sailboat harder and harder past the limits that it could handle. While desperately trying to gain distance on Crowhurst, Tetley's boat fell to pieces and sank in the Atlantic. Thank God he survived, but his raft didn't. Crowhurst was now on track to win the Golden Globe race, and he crowned the greatest sailor of all time. Supporters at home were stunned. On June 18th, the BBC sent Crowhurst a telegram that read, "Congratulations on progress. Have network television program for day of return." In the town of Tenerife, a Welcome Home Donald Crowhurst committee was formed to celebrate its new hero. The plan was for BBC helicopter to follow him back to port while a parade complete with a firing cannon met his triumphant return. Crowhurst's diary makes clear how much this impending fame of all of it ill-gotten, all of it risky if the truth was uncovered, worried him. Life was a game to Crowhurst. As he pondered his fate, he wrote in his diary, "Cannot see any purpose in the game. I am what I am, and I see the nature of my offense." Then came the ominous entries. One read, "It is finished, it is finished. It is the mercy." And the final entry, "It is the end of my game. The truth has been revealed, and it will be done as my family require me to do it. I have no need to prolong the game. It has been a good game, but it must be ended. I will play this game when I choose, and I will resign the game." The Teignmouth Electron, which was the boat that he was sailing with, was found 11 days later adrift in the Atlantic. There was no sign of major damage, no sign of accident, and no sign of Donald. He was never seen again. He had, in all likelihood, thrown himself into the sea and taken his own life. In a sweet twist of irony, Robin Knox Johnston, the only man to finish the Golden Globe race, donated the $5,000 in prize money to Claire Crowhurst. It was enough to spare the bankruptcy that Donald Crowhurst dreaded would haunt his family if he didn't finish the race. Just, be- just before Crowhurst took his life, another sailor in the Golden Globe race made an equally astonishing decision at sea. Bernard Moitier was an expert sailor, and 5 months into the race, he was on track to legitimately win. Moitier, a Frenchman who was 48 years old during the race, loved sailing and spent most of his life at sea, but he seemed to despise the commercialization of the sport. The idea of performing for the media, the sponsors, the press seemed to damage his soul. He just liked sailing for sailing's sake. Moitier didn't even bring a radio on his trip, preferring solitude and letting other passing ships report his location to race organizers back in England. The personality required to spend 9 months alone at sea selects people who are comfortable detaching from society. Moitier was an extreme version of that, and the idea of sailing for someone else's pleasure was so detestable that midway through his voyage, he had enough. He wrote in his diary, "I really felt sick at the thought of getting back to Europe, back to the snake pit. I'm really fed up with the false gods, always lying in wait, spider-like, eating our liver, sucking our marrow. I charge the modern world. That's the monster, trampling the soul of men." But being in his boat, Joshua, was a different story. That actually fed his soul. Monsieur later recalled. The days go by, never monotonous. Even when they appear exactly alike, they are never quite the same. That is what gives life at sea its special dimension, made up of contemplation and very simple contrast. Sea, winds, calms, suns, clouds, purpose, peace, and the joy of being alive in harmony. As he sailed around the Cape Horn on his way back to England, Moitier began contemplating the unthinkable. Quitting the race, he was on track to win and sailing somewhere else. Thinking of his family and friends, he wrote, "I do not know how to explain to them my need to be at peace, to continue towards the Pacific. They will not understand, and I know I'm right. I feel it deeply. I know exactly where I'm going, even if I do not know." Then he made the decision. Monsieur flagged down a passing commercial ship to hand off a message. It was a letter addressed to the editor of the Sunday Times that read, Dear Robert, today is March 18th. I am continuing nonstop towards the Pacific Islands because I am happy at sea and perhaps to save my soul. Monsieur shouted for the captain to take the message to the French consul. He then quit the race, turned his boat around, and set sail for Tahiti. Monsieur wrote in his diary, Now it is a story between Joshua and me, between me and the sky, a story just for us, a great story that does not concern the others anymore. To have the time, to have the choice, not knowing where you are heading and just going there anyway, without a care, without asking any more questions. To some at home, Monsieur had gone mad. In his mind, he had found his own version of sanity. He anchored in Tahiti in June, built a house on the beach, grew his own food, and wrote a book about sailing. You can't understand how happy I am, he said. In a twist of irony, Tahiti was so far out of the way and required so much backtracking that despite dropping out of the race, Monsieur did circles around the globe and set a world record for the longest ever nonstop solo sail, more than 37,000 miles. There is no mention of the fact in his book. He didn't seem to care whether anyone knew, and certainly didn't want the attention. The point of the story is not to ridicule Crowhurst or Heroes Monsieur. 9 months alone at sea is enough to drive anyone mad, and I can sympathize with Crowhurst's feelings of desperation and Monsieur's decision. Though perhaps, right for him, would be disastrous for most people who enjoy, if not crave, the social acceptance. But extreme examples often highlight emotions many people experience every day, and I think that's the case here. It's very simple. Crowhurst was addicted to what other people thought of his accomplishments, while Monsieur could not have cared less. Once lived, one lived for external benchmarks, and the other only cared about internal measures of happiness. And knowing the difference between the two is so powerful in life. Warren Buffett once said, the big question about how people behave is whether they've got an inner scorecard or an outer scorecard. It helps you. It helps if you can be satisfied with the inner scorecard. He used this example. Would you rather be known as the best investor in the world, but in reality be the worst? Or be thought of as the world's worst investor, but you actually are the best? That's another extreme example, but it gets you thinking about what actually matters to you. Every decision we make when spending money falls into one or two buckets. Are you spending money on something because it makes people think of you differently, like like you more, be impressed with you, maybe even be jealous of you, or because it actually makes you feel good? It feeds your soul, it makes you happy. Using Buffett's framework, would you rather have people be impressed with your possessions but be miserable inside, or have no one care what you own but wake up happy every morning? I have no idea how to find the perfect balance between internal and external benchmarks, but I know that there's a strong social pull towards external measures. Chasing a path someone else set, whether you enjoy it or not, social media makes it 10 times more powerful. But I also know there's a strong natural desire for internal measures. And being independent, following your quirky habits, and doing what you want, when you want, with whom you want, that's money's highest purpose. Because that's what most people actually want. Next, after this chapter, we're going to go over an important twist on this idea with the story of a blind man who can teach us so much about happiness. Wow, I love this chapter so much. Wow. First of all, if you know how to sail, congratulations. Put it in the comments. That's awesome. And I'm also I'm also curious to know, are you internally or externally focused? you know, to measure your success or measure your value, measure anything. Is it internal or external? Don't think that one is right. Don't think the other one is wrong. Put it in the comments and share which one you gravitate to more. You know, actually, we were just talking about this the other day about how back in the day, um, maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, when we were running our first company, we had to show that we are successful through external materialistic things through our, let's say, Instagram, social media. And when our clients or the people that we wanted to attract saw those things, whether it was a nice car, whether it was the trips, whether it's like continuously traveling all over the place, it was like that's what made them want to work with us, right? But at the end of the day, that was just like bait in a way. Oh, what's that? And then they get to know us. And then they actually work with us. And then they actually get to know us again. And then they're actually wanting to work with us some more. Right. And I think bait is the wrong word. It sounds bad. I would call it more like the social media trap. That's what I would say. If you are looking for that, if you are, um, like he was talking about the Ferrari, if you are, oh my God, desiring a Ferrari and that's all you care about in life, and then you see someone with a Ferrari, you're going to be like, oh, who's that? Who's that? I want to know them. What are they doing? How can I do that? It's human nature. It's very animalistic type, primitive, of humans to do that. However, when I feel you get to a certain point where you realize that that's not even a thing, like external validations are not what actually feeds your soul, that's when the game changes. That's when life starts really celebrating you. You might go through a depression, you might go through like a high and then a low, but then the slow climb up, you know, is what makes it all worth it because those slow climb ups are helping you reach a new level within you. And that's the inner work. That is the inner work, which is a powerful, powerful thing to do. So I know we've all gone through it, maybe, maybe not. I know I have, that's for sure. Uh, for sure. I know that I've definitely grown and there's still certain things that I do have that I feel are external based, you know, but I don't think it's for the wrong intentions. However, I'm still growing, I'm still learning, I'm still developing myself. And, that's the beauty about all this. That's the beauty of life, I believe, is the ability to recognize and contemplate and have these moments of truth and vulnerability, being able to be vulnerable enough to say, you know what, that did happen in the past. And now I'm able to move on into my future or my present. And I can learn from the past and avoid certain things because now I know better, or I know myself more, or I'm taking care of myself first versus trying to allow so and so to validate who you are and what you think and everything. Because you're the only validation that you need. So, your own validation. Okay. In the next chapter, okay, we're going to go into what makes you happy. And I'm really excited about this one because a good life is everything you need and some of what you want. If you have everything you want, you appreciate none of what you have. I'll leave you with that, and I'll see you in the next read with me where we cover chapter 7. Bye.